Imagine for a moment walking into a dark, cool cave in the south of France. The air is damp, heavy with the smell of stone and earth. On wooden shelves stretching into the shadows are great wheels of cheese, pale ivory marbled with blue-green veins that seem to glow like tiny rivers under moonlight. These, you are told, are not mistakes, not food gone off, but Roquefort, one of the oldest and most celebrated cheeses in the world. The very thing that makes Roquefort special, the very essence of its flavour, is mould. Actual mould. The same sort of stuff you might be horrified to find growing on bread in the back of your cupboard. And yet, here in this cave, mould has been elevated into culinary nobility. So how on earth did people ever decide to eat this in the first place? And perhaps more importantly, how do we get from a humble bucket of milk to this royal veined delicacy that smells faintly of mushrooms, cellars, and sometimes, if we're honest, socks? That is our journey today. Welcome, cheese and dairy enthusiasts. Whether you're all about Gouda, goat cheese, or a classic cheddar, we're here to share the love of all things dairy with you. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for a fun, cheesy experience. Blue cheese is one of those foods that divides people cleanly into camps. To some, it is heavenly, a symphony of tang, cream, and spice that wakes up the palate. To others, it is unthinkable, too pungent, too strange, too blue. But whether you love it or loathe it, the process that creates it is a small miracle of science, accident, and human stubbornness. Because let's be honest, if you found a mouldy lump of dairy sitting in a cave, your first instinct would probably not be to taste it. Yet somehow, somewhere, someone did. And not only did they survive, but they liked it. The legend of blue cheese begins, fittingly, with romance. In one version, a shepherd in France abandons his lunch of bread and sheep's milk cheese in a cave when he is distracted by a beautiful maiden. Weeks later, returning to the spot, he discovers his meal transformed, marbled with streaks of blue mould. On a whim, or perhaps out of hunger, he tastes it, and lo, a delicacy is born. It's a wonderful story, but probably nonsense. Scientists who've gone spelunking in Roquefort caves have failed to find wild Penicillium roqueforti spores just floating about in the air. Which suggests the truth may be less romantic, but far more interesting. That humans somehow domesticated the mould itself, much like we once domesticated wild wheat or cattle. And here's another curiosity. For centuries, French cheesemakers actually grew the blue mould on loaves of rye bread, then crumbled the mouldy bread into fresh milk curds to seed them. In other words, to make cheese, they first made bread go bad. Isn't that marvellous? Of course, legends and rye loaves aside, what really matters is how blue cheese is made. Because it turns out that creating a cheese so gloriously streaked and aromatic is not merely a matter of leaving milk out until it smells suspicious. It's a deliberate, careful choreography of bacteria, moulds, and human patience. And the process, when broken down, is equal parts rustic simplicity and astonishing science. Let's begin at the beginning. Milk. Not all milk is created equal, at least not in the world of blue cheese. Roquefort is made from sheep's milk, which lends it a rich lanolin tang. Gorgonzola from cow's milk, lush and buttery, and Stilton from cow's milk too, but with a nutty mellowness that is distinctly English. Each type of milk brings its own character, different fat levels, different proteins, and different flavours waiting to be coaxed out. So, picture a cheesemaker, let's say an Italian, moustached, with a vat the size of a small swimming pool. Into this vat goes the milk, warmed gently until it is about the temperature of a nice bath. At this point, the magic begins. Cultures of lactic acid bacteria are added. Their job is to sip away at the lactose, turning it into lactic acid, which will help the milk set and begin to taste like cheese rather than just warm dairy. This is also when the mould is invited to the party. Penicillium roqueforti, the little fungus that gives blue cheese its blue, is sprinkled in. At first, it does nothing visible. The milk looks the same, placid, white, innocent. But lurking in that liquid are millions of spores waiting for their chance to bloom. Next comes rennet, an enzyme traditionally obtained from the stomach lining of young calves, though nowadays often made in labs. Rennet coagulates the milk, turning it into a jelly-like mass called curd. And then, with long knives or wire harps, the curd is cut into pieces, releasing a golden liquid, whey. You know the rhyme about Little Miss Muffet? That's the stuff, curds and whey. Now, most cheeses at this point are pressed firmly into shape, but blue cheese is different. The curds are ladled or scooped into molds with minimal pressing. The goal is not to make them tight and solid, but rather to leave gaps, tiny air pockets between them. Those gaps will become the highways through which oxygen enters and mold can spread. It's one of those happy accidents of cheesemaking. What looks like sloppy workmanship is, in fact, a masterstroke. Salt is added too, sometimes rubbed onto the rind, sometimes mixed into the curds. Salt does three things. It seasons, it controls bacteria, and it slows down the blue mold just enough to keep it from running wild. Without salt, blue cheese would taste chaotic, sour, bitter, perhaps even unsafe. With salt, it becomes balanced, savory, thrilling. And then comes the most theatrical moment in the whole production: piercing. Imagine rows of pale wheels of cheese, like moons lined up on wooden shelves. Cheesemakers take long steel needles and drive them through each wheel, over and over, until the cheese resembles a sort of dairy pincushion. Why? Because penicillium is aerobic. It needs air. These pinholes are like little chimneys, allowing oxygen to seep deep into the cheese's heart. And once oxygen arrives, the mold wakes up, stretches its filaments, and begins to paint the interior with rivers of blue-green. If you've ever cut open a blue cheese and wondered how those delicate veins formed in such neat marbling, now you know. They are literally growing along the tunnels created by needles. Without piercing, you would have a perfectly respectable white cheese. With piercing, you have blue cheese. Now, stabbing cheese full of holes might seem like vandalism, but this is only the midpoint of our story. Because after piercing, the wheels are placed in aging rooms, sometimes caves, sometimes high-tech warehouses with humidity gauges and thermostats. And here is where the real magic unfolds. For Roquefort, the caves of Mont Combalou are legendary. They are cool, consistently damp, and laced with tiny fissures that allow fresh air to circulate. If you want to picture them, imagine a cathedral designed not for humans, but for mold. Wooden planks are stacked with wheels of sheep's milk cheese, and over the months, Penicillium roqueforti slowly colonizes the paste, turning what was once bland white curd into something spangled with emerald veins. To this day, French law insists that genuine Roquefort can only be aged in those caves. You can build all the stainless steel rooms you want elsewhere, but if it doesn't come from Mont Combalou, it isn't Roquefort. Other blue cheeses, like Stilton or Gorgonzola, ripen in cellars or controlled chambers. The key is humidity. Too dry and the cheese cracks. Too wet and unwanted molds may invade. Temperature too must just be cool enough to slow spoilage, warm enough for the mold to breathe. It's a balancing act that cheesemakers have learned over centuries, sometimes by accident, sometimes by disaster. There are stories of wheels that ripened unevenly, one half glorious, the other tragically bland, because the air didn't circulate right. And this is where things get truly fascinating, because as the cheese ripens, the mold doesn't just sit there, it works. It sends out enzymes, tiny biochemical tools that break down fats into free fatty acids. These acids then transform into compounds with names like 2-heptanone and 2-nanonone. They sound like chemicals from a laboratory, but they are in fact the molecules that make blue cheese taste like blue cheese. Sharp, pungent, peppery, earthy. All the strange and wonderful adjectives people use to describe it trace back to these invisible molecules. At the same time, the mold digests proteins, releasing amino acids and even a touch of ammonia. That's why some blues have that tangy, almost biting aroma. You are literally smelling the byproducts of fungal digestion. And yet, instead of being horrified, we humans find this delicious. One of nature's great ironies. We recoil from mold on bread, but when it tunnels through cheese, we celebrate it. And of course, the length of aging changes everything. A young blue cheese, perhaps only 2 months old, will be creamy and mild, a gentle introduction to mold. Leave it for 6 months and it becomes crumbly, sharp, sometimes almost metallic. Roquefort in particular develops an intensity that lingers on your tongue long after the bite is gone. Stilton tends to mellow into a nutty richness, while Gorgonzola comes in both soft dolce varieties and firmer picante ones that can bring tears to your eyes in the best possible way. What's extraordinary is that people not only learned to control this process, but to fine-tune it. Today, cheesemakers choose specific strains of penicillium, each with its own character. One might produce more creaminess, another more tang. Some cheeses are wrapped in foil halfway through aging, not to stop the mold, but to redirect its growth, slowing the surface so the inside remains moist and luscious. Every choice of salt amount, piercing depth, and aging time affects the outcome. In the old days, cheesemakers didn't have neat lab cultures of mold. Instead, they kept loaves of rye bread deliberately moldy, then crumbled them into new batches of curd. Imagine your livelihood depending on baking bread specifically to rot. And yet, it worked, passing along generations of penicillium from loaf to loaf, cheese to cheese. Modern science has tidied this up, of course, but the principle remains the same. Carefully nurtured mold equals blue cheese. So here we are, a wheel of blue cheese, veins of mold shining like rivers under pale light. Its smell wafting across the room in a way that makes some people swoon and others back away. At this point, you might reasonably ask, is it actually good for us? After all, we are eating fungus-riddled dairy. Should we be worried? The answer, rather pleasingly, is that blue cheese is not only safe but quite nourishing, though with the usual caveats. An ounce or so provides a sturdy 6 grams of protein, a fistful of calcium, and a clutch of vitamins like A and B12. It is, as one nutritionist put it, a small rock of nutrients. The downside? Salt and saturated fat. Blue cheeses are salty by design. Salt helps control the mold, and a bit fatty too. Nobody sits down with a wheel of Roquefort and eats it like an apple. Blue cheese is intense, so we consume it in small amounts. A crumble on salad, a slice with bread, a dollop in sauce. And in those portions, the salt and fat are hardly ruinous. More intriguingly, scientists have suggested that the mold itself may carry benefits. Certain compounds produced by Penicillium roqueforti during ripening have anti-inflammatory effects, which might explain part of the so-called French paradox, how the French, who eat plenty of rich foods, have comparatively low rates of heart disease. Whether Roquefort is truly protective remains uncertain, but it's a rather delightful thought that the very mold once viewed as spoilage could, in fact, be medicine. Of course, there are exceptions. Pregnant individuals are usually told to avoid blue cheeses, not because of the mold, but because soft, moist cheeses can harbour Listeria monocytogenes, a bacterium far more dangerous than any penicillium. Likewise, if you have high blood pressure, you'll want to watch the salt. And though penicillin allergies rarely cross over to cheese molds, anyone with serious mold allergies might sensibly steer clear. But for most of us, a dab of Stilton or a sliver of Gorgonzola is no more hazardous than a piece of cheddar, and far more interesting. There's also the small matter of smell. Blue cheese smells strong. No one can deny this. Some describe it as earthy, mushroomy, like the floor of a forest after rain. Others, less generously, compare it to unwashed socks. Much like coffee or whiskey, aromas that at first seem unpleasant can become beloved once our brain learns to associate them with pleasure. It is, in a way, an acquired language. The smell of blue cheese says prepare for something bold, and then when the taste follows, salty, creamy, spicy, the mind makes the connection, and the odd smell becomes a promise rather than a warning. And let's not forget, taste is only half the story. Blue cheese has become a cultural actor in its own right, inspiring traditions and rituals. The English eat Stilton with port at Christmas. The French pair Roquefort with honey and walnuts. In Italy, Gorgonzola seeps luxuriously into risotto and polenta. Each tradition is a small celebration of transformation. Humble milk elevated into something transcendent by the quiet work of microbes. So, What began as milk, white, innocent, perishable, was turned through cultures and mold into something blue, pungent, and enduring. Along the way, we passed through caves, laboratories, and centuries of human tinkering. We saw bread deliberately left to rot, steel needles punching moonlight wheels, and microbes politely digesting proteins on our behalf. And the result is a food that inspires poetry in some, revulsion in others, but indifference in almost no one. Blue cheese's origin story, romantic though it may be, hints at a deeper truth. Humans have always been ingenious enough, or desperate enough, to try the improbable. The production process is not an accident, but a kind of choreography, where milk, mold, salt, and air play their parts with surprising precision. The science of blue cheese, the enzymatic alchemy of penicillium, creates not just flavour, but perhaps even health benefits, making this oddest of foods a potential ally rather than an enemy. Blue cheese is not spoiled milk, but rather a cultivated transformation, a living testament to the idea that with a little patience and curiosity, humans can turn rot into royalty. There is something profoundly satisfying in that. We live in an age of stainless steel and sterilisation, where mould is usually a foe to be scrubbed and bleached away. And yet, here is a food that says, no, don't kill the mould, invite it in, let it work. Blue cheese reminds us that not all decay is bad. Sometimes it is the very process by which something ordinary becomes extraordinary. If you're enjoying this creamy content, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, 99% of our viewers haven't hit that subscribe button yet. It's totally free and just takes a second. We've got tons of cool stuff coming your way, and in the meantime, leave a comment down below. Share your thoughts with us. Your support helps us to keep exploring and uncovering the hidden side of what we eat. So, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button and age like a fine cheese.